"Drink this, sweetheart, I made it just for you," my mother-in-law Patricia said as she placed the steaming cup of herbal tea in front of me. Her smile was warm, and carrying the same smile she had worn for the past 7 years of my marriage to her son Brandon, but something about the way her eyes lingered on my growing belly made my skin crawl. I was 14 weeks pregnant with our 4th attempt at having a baby after 3 devastating miscarriages, and Patricia had insisted on staying with us to help me rest and recover from the difficult first trimester. I lifted the cup to my lips, inhaling the strange bitter scent that I had grown to associate with her special care, and in that moment I had no idea that the woman I called Mom was slowly killing my babies 1 cup at a time. My name is Meredith, and at 35 years old I had already buried 3 children who never got the chance to take their first breath. This is the story of how I discovered that my miscarriages weren't tragedies of nature but calculated murders committed by the woman who smiled at me every morning, and the husband who held me while I cried, not knowing he was part of the reason for my tears. I met Brandon at a friend's wedding when I was 26 years old. He was tall, charming, with kind brown eyes and a laugh that made everyone around him smile. We talked for hours that night about everything and nothing, and by the time he asked for my number I already knew I was falling for him. Our relationship moved quickly, engaged within a year, married at 28 in a beautiful ceremony at his family's estate in Connecticut. From the outside we were the perfect couple, successful, attractive, madly in love, and ready to start the family we both dreamed of having. Patricia adored me in the beginning, or so I thought. She called me the daughter she never had. She taught me her family recipes, took me shopping for my wedding dress, and told everyone who would listen how perfect I was for her. Brandon, I believed every word. I had lost my own father young, and my mother Linda lived across the country in Oregon, so having Patricia's warmth and attention felt like a gift. I didn't know it was all an act, a carefully constructed performance designed to bring me close enough to destroy. We started trying for a baby 6 months after the wedding, and I got pregnant almost immediately. Brandon and I were ecstatic, decorating the nursery, picking out names, imagining our future as parents. Patricia was thrilled too. She started coming over more often, bringing healthy meals and her special herbal tea blends that she said would help the baby grow strong. I drank them every day, grateful for her care and attention. I was 11 weeks along when I woke up in the middle of the night with cramps that felt like knives twisting in my abdomen. By the time Brandon got me to the hospital, the baby was gone. The doctor called it a spontaneous miscarriage, said it was common especially with first pregnancies, that there was nothing I could have done differently, that sometimes these things just happen. Brandon held me while I sobbed, and Patricia sat in the corner of my hospital room dabbing at her eyes and promising that everything would be okay, that God had a plan, that we would try again and have our rainbow baby. I believed her. I had no reason not to. We waited 6 months before trying again per the doctor's recommendation, and I got pregnant on our 2nd cycle. This time I was more cautious, taking prenatal vitamins, avoiding stress, staying home from work to rest. Patricia practically moved in during those early weeks, cooking all my meals, preparing her special teas, making sure I didn't lift a finger. I thought she was being the perfect mother-in-law, the kind of support every pregnant woman dreams of having. I was 13 weeks along, just entering the 2nd trimester, the so-called safe zone, when the bleeding started again. The 2nd miscarriage was worse than the first, not physically but emotionally, because this time I had let myself hope, had let myself believe that we would finally have our baby. I had already bought a tiny pair of yellow booties, already started a Pinterest board for the nursery, already whispered to my belly at night, telling the little bean inside how much mommy and daddy loved them, and then it was over again, and the doctor was using words like incompetent cervix and hormonal imbalance and recommended genetic testing, but all the tests came back normal. My body was perfectly capable of carrying a pregnancy, it just wouldn't. I fell into a depression after that one. Stopped going to work, stopped seeing friends, stopped doing anything except lying in bed and crying. Brandon tried to help, but he seemed distant, distracted, always on his phone or making excuses to leave the room. Patricia was there, constantly bringing me tea, bringing me soup, sitting by my bed, and telling me stories about her own difficult pregnancy with Brandon, how she had almost lost him too, how she understood my pain better than anyone. I clung to her words like a lifeline, not knowing that she was the one drowning me. The 3rd pregnancy came a year later. After rounds of fertility treatments and consultations with specialists, they put me on progesterone supplements to support the pregnancy, gave me weekly ultrasounds to monitor every tiny development, and for a while it seemed like this time would be different. I made it past 11 weeks, past 13 weeks, past 15 weeks, farther than I had ever gotten before. Patricia had backed off a little during this pregnancy, staying at her own house, only visiting a few times a week. But she still brought her teas, still made her special meals, still hovered over me with that caring smile whenever she came over. I was 17 weeks pregnant the day the cramps started. That miscarriage broke something inside me that I don't think will ever fully heal. I had felt the baby move just days before, tiny flutters that made me cry with joy, and then I was in a hospital bed again watching doctors and nurses move around me with grim faces while Brandon stood in the corner looking not devastated like I expected, but almost relieved. I told myself I was imagining it, that grief was making me see things that weren't there, but something shifted in me that day. Some small voice in the back of my mind started whispering that something was very, very wrong. My mother Linda flew in from Oregon as soon as she heard, staying for 2 weeks to take care of me while Brandon went back to work, and Patricia returned to her regular visits. Linda had never warmed to Patricia the way I had always said. There was something off about her, something too polished, too perfect, but I had dismissed her concerns as typical mother-in-law rivalry. Now as I lay in my childhood bedroom at my mother's house too, broken to go back to the home where I had lost 3 babies, I started to wonder if maybe she had seen something I was too blind to see. It was Linda who first voiced the suspicion I was too afraid to name. We were sitting on her back porch watching the sunset when she turned to me and said, "Honey, I want to ask you something, and I need you to really think about it. Has anything been the same with all 3 pregnancies?" I started to say no to dismiss the question, but something stopped me. I thought about the tea, Patricia's special herbal blends that she insisted I drink every day, the ones that tasted bitter and strange, the ones she said were an old family recipe for healthy pregnancies. She had given me that tea during all 3 pregnancies, I realized, and all 3 pregnancies had ended the same way. I didn't want to believe it, couldn't accept that the woman who had been like a mother to me could be capable of something so monstrous, but Linda was already pulling out her phone researching herbal abortifacients, natural substances that could cause miscarriage. The list was long and horrifying: pennyroyal, tansy, mugwort, blue cohosh, all of them plants that could end a pregnancy, all of them readily available if you knew where to look, and all of them with a distinctive bitter taste that could easily be masked by other herbs in a tea blend. The next time Patricia came to visit, I told her I wasn't feeling well, that I just wanted to rest and didn't need any tea. She looked surprised, maybe even a little annoyed, but she left the tea anyway, a full pot sitting on my kitchen counter waiting for me to drink it. After she left, I didn't pour it down the drain like I wanted to. Instead, I carefully poured some into a clean container and drove it to a private laboratory that Linda had found, one that could test for toxic substances without asking too many questions. The results would take a week, the longest week of my entire life. During that week I started paying attention to things I had ignored for years: the way Patricia watched me drink her tea, the satisfied look in her eyes when I finished a cup, the way she always seemed to know exactly when I was pregnant before I had even told anyone, the way Brandon always deferred to his mother, always took her side, always seemed uncomfortable when I tried to set boundaries. I also started going through Brandon's things, something I had never done before: not his phone, which he kept locked, but his email, which he sometimes left logged in on our shared laptop. What I found in those emails shattered whatever was left of my heart. The messages between Brandon and Patricia went back years, casual at first, just mother and son checking in on each other. But then I found the thread that started right after our wedding. Patricia had written, "I still don't think she's right for you, sweetheart. Her family has a history of mental illness and addiction. You know that her genetics aren't what we want for our grandchildren." Brandon's response made me physically sick. "I know, Mom, but I love her. And we're already married. Just give her a chance. If it doesn't work out, we can always get a divorce before any kids come along." The thread continued through my first pregnancy, and Patricia's tone grew more urgent. "I've been doing research," she wrote. "There are natural ways to prevent unsuitable pregnancies from continuing. If you want, I can handle this discreetly, and you won't have to be involved." Brandon's reply was only 2 words: "Do it." I sat in front of that laptop screen for an hour, unable to move, unable to breathe, reading message after message that detailed Patricia's plan to poison me with her herbal teas, to end my pregnancies, to rid her son of the unsuitable wife, without anyone ever knowing what had happened. They discussed dosages and timing, and how to make sure I never suspected anything. They celebrated when each pregnancy ended, and Brandon comforted his mother when she expressed frustration that I kept getting pregnant again, that I wouldn't just accept my infertility and give up. They were partners in this, mother and son, united in their mission to prevent me from ever carrying their precious family bloodline. The laboratory results came back 3 days later, confirming what I already knew. Patricia's tea contained significant concentrations of pennyroyal and blue cohosh, both known abortifacients. In the amount she had been giving me, they would have been enough to cause miscarriage, while leaving almost no trace in standard medical tests. She had been poisoning me for 7 years, killing my babies 1 cup of tea at a time, and the man I had married, the man I had loved and trusted and grieved with, had known about it from the very beginning. I wanted to confront them immediately, to scream and rage and make them pay for what they had done, but my mother stopped me. "Evidence first," she said, "justice later. We need to make sure they can never talk their way out of this." She was right, as much as I hated to admit it. If I confronted them now, they would destroy the evidence, deny everything, maybe even find a way to turn it around on me. I needed to be smart, I needed to be patient, I needed to build a case so airtight that not even Patricia's money and connections could save her, I hired a lawyer named Catherine Chen who specialized in criminal cases and told her everything. She was horrified but professional, immediately connecting me with a private investigator and a forensic expert who could analyze the tea and testify about its effects. We documented everything: the emails, the lab results, the pattern of my pregnancies, and Patricia's presence during each one. The investigator dug into Patricia's past and found something that made my blood run cold. 35 years ago, when Brandon was an infant, Patricia's first husband had died suddenly of heart failure. No autopsy was performed, and Patricia inherited his entire estate. 2 years later, she married Brandon's father, who was significantly wealthier, and who had also died under suspicious circumstances. A decade later, Patricia had a history, and my babies were just the latest victims. The district attorney was skeptical at first. 3 miscarriages caused by herbal tea sounded almost too strange to be true, but the evidence was overwhelming. The toxicology reports, the emails, the pattern of behavior, the forensic expert's testimony about exactly how the substances in Patricia's tea would affect a developing fetus. They convened a grand jury, and within a month both Patricia and Brandon were indicted. Patricia for 3 counts of first-degree murder of an unborn child, assault with intent to cause great bodily harm, and attempted murder. Brandon was charged as an accessory to all counts. The arrests happened on a Sunday morning. I had moved out of our house weeks earlier, staying with my mother while the investigation proceeded, but I asked the detectives if I could be there when they brought Patricia in. They agreed. Maybe they understood that I needed to see it, needed to watch the moment when everything she had built came crashing down around her. I stood in the police station lobby as they brought her through in handcuffs. Her perfectly styled gray hair disheveled, her designer clothes wrinkled her face, a mask of outraged disbelief. When she saw me standing there, she actually had the nerve to look hurt. "Meredith," she said, her voice trembling, "sweetie, what is happening? Why are they doing this to me? Tell them this is all a misunderstanding." I took a step closer, close enough to see the fear finally flickering behind her eyes, and I said, "I found your emails, Patricia. I tested your tea. I know what you did to my babies." Her face went white, and for just a moment the mask slipped and I saw the real woman underneath, cold, calculating, furious that she had finally been caught. Then the officers were leading her away, and she was screaming that I was crazy, that I had made it all up, that her son would never let this stand. They brought Brandon in an hour later, and that was harder to watch. He looked broken, already dark circles under his eyes, his clothes disheveled like he hadn't slept in days. When he saw me, he started crying. "Meredith, please," he said, "you have to understand, I never wanted this. My mother, she made me. I was afraid of her. I didn't know what she was capable of. I wanted to feel something, pity maybe, or satisfaction, or even anger, but all I felt was empty. This man had watched me grieve for 3 children that his mother had killed, had held me while I cried and told me everything would be okay, knowing that he was the reason it never would be. He wasn't worth my anger anymore. He wasn't worth anything." The trial lasted 6 weeks, and it was covered by every major news outlet in the country. The mother-in-law who poisoned her daughter-in-law's tea to prevent unsuitable grandchildren. It was the kind of story that captured the public imagination, equal parts horror and fascination. I testified for 2 days, describing my pregnancies, my miscarriages, the tea Patricia had insisted I drink, the emails between her and Brandon that revealed their conspiracy. The forensic expert explained exactly how pennyroyal and blue cohosh affect pregnancy, causing uterine contractions and disrupting hormone levels. The prosecution showed the jury exactly how much of these substances Patricia had been putting in my tea, enough to guarantee that no pregnancy could survive past the first trimester. Patricia's defense was predictable. She claimed I was mentally unstable, obsessed with having children, and looking for someone to blame for my own body's failure. She claimed the emails had been taken out of context, that she had never meant any real harm, that the tea was just an old family recipe, and she had no idea it could affect pregnancy. The jury didn't believe her for a second. They deliberated for less than 4 hours. Patricia was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 45 years in prison without possibility of parole. The judge called her crimes unconscionable, a betrayal of the deepest kind committed against a woman who trusted her and loved her, and called her family. Brandon pleaded guilty to avoid a trial, and received 15 years. He will be 52 when he gets out, an old man with nothing left, no wife, no children, no inheritance, because Patricia's assets were seized and my divorce settlement took everything else. The day of Patricia's sentencing, I read a victim impact statement to the court. I had worked on it for weeks, trying to find the words to describe what she had taken from me. I talked about my 3 babies, about the tiny heartbeats I had heard on ultrasounds, about the names I had picked, and the nursery I had decorated and dismantled 3 times. I talked about the years of grief and self-blame, the depression that nearly killed me, the marriage I thought was my refuge but was actually my prison, and I Talked about Patricia herself, the woman who had hugged me at my wedding, who had brought me tea every morning, who had sat beside me in hospital rooms and pretended to mourn babies that she had deliberately killed. I looked directly at her when I said my final words. You took 3 lives from this world, Patricia, 3 children, who deserved to exist, 3 people who might have grown up to cure diseases or write beautiful music or simply live ordinary, happy lives. They will never get that chance. Because of you, and I hope you think about them every single day for the rest of your miserable life. Patricia didn't react, didn't cry, didn't even look away. She just stared at me with those cold, empty eyes, and I realized that she probably didn't feel anything at all. She had killed my babies the same way someone might pull weeds from a garden, inconvenient, unwanted obstacles to be removed. She wasn't sorry, she was just angry that she got caught. The years after the trial were hard in ways I hadn't expected. I had justice, but justice doesn't heal grief, doesn't bring back the children I lost, doesn't erase the memories of drinking that tea day after day, trusting the woman who was poisoning me. I went to therapy, worked through the trauma slowly, painfully, and eventually found my way back to something resembling life. My mother Linda was my rock through all of it, letting me stay with her in Oregon, never pushing me to move on before I was ready, just being there. I met David at a grief support group 2 years after the trial. He had lost his wife to cancer and understood loss in a way that most people couldn't. We became friends first, then something more, something I never thought I would feel again. Love, not the naive, trusting love I had felt for Brandon, but something stronger, tempered by pain and loss and the knowledge of how precious and fragile happiness really is. We got married in a small ceremony in my mother's backyard with only a handful of people who truly mattered. When I got pregnant a year later, I was terrified, not of losing the baby necessarily, but of what might happen if I trusted the wrong person again. David understood. He came to every doctor's appointment, held my hand during every ultrasound, never once made me feel crazy for being afraid. I didn't drink tea for the entire pregnancy, didn't let anyone else prepare my food, didn't let anyone into our lives who hadn't been thoroughly vetted by my still hypervigilant mother. My daughter Eleanor was born on a sunny Tuesday morning in March, 8 6 pounds ounces, with a full head of dark hair, and her father's curious eyes. When they placed her on my chest, I cried harder than I had ever cried in my life, not from sadness but from overwhelming, impossible joy. She was here, she was real, she was alive, and no one would ever hurt her the way Patricia had hurt my other babies. I made that promise to her silently in that delivery room, and I have kept it every day since. Eleanor is 3 now, a wild, funny, stubborn little person who fills our house with noise and chaos and more love than I ever thought possible. I tell her sometimes about her siblings, the 3 babies who came before her, who made me strong enough and careful enough to bring her into the world safely. She doesn't understand yet, but someday she will, and she will know that she was wanted and loved and protected from the very beginning. I got a letter from Brandon last year, written from the prison where he is serving his sentence. He said he was sorry that he had been weak, that his mother had manipulated him his whole life, and he didn't know how to stand up to her. He asked if I could ever forgive him. I read the letter twice, then burned it. Some things are unforgivable, and asking for absolution doesn't mean you deserve to receive it. Brandon chose his mother over his wife, over his children, over basic human decency he can live with that choice in his cell for the next decade, and I hope every day feels like a lifetime. Patricia died in prison last winter. She was 67 years old, and according to the news report, she died alone in the medical wing after a short illness. No family members came to claim her body. I thought I would feel something when I heard the news, relief maybe, or satisfaction, but I didn't feel anything at all. She had been dead to me for years already. The physical death was just a formality. My mother Linda passed away last spring peacefully in her sleep at the age of 66. She lived long enough to meet Eleanor, to hold her granddaughter, and watch her take her first steps, to know that her daughter had survived and thrived despite everything. I miss her every day, but I also know that I wouldn't be alive without her suspicion, her determination, her refusal to let Patricia get away with murder. She saved me in every way a person can be saved, and I try to honor that by being the same kind of mother to Eleanor, fierce, protective, unwilling to let anyone hurt the people I love. I'm 40 now, older than I ever imagined being when I was lying in that hospital bed after my 3rd miscarriage, wanting to die. I have a husband who loves me, a daughter who is my entire world, a life that feels impossible and miraculous after everything I've been through. I still have bad days, still wake up sometimes with tears on my face from dreams about tiny heartbeats that stop too soon, but the bad days are fewer now and the good days are so good that they almost make up for everything that came before. If you're reading this and something feels wrong in your life, if someone who claims to care about you is making you sick, is causing you pain, is taking things from you that you can't explain, please trust yourself. You are not crazy, you are not paranoid, you are not imagining things. Sometimes the people closest to us are the most dangerous, and the only way to survive is to open your eyes and see them clearly. I wish someone had told me that 7 years ago, but I'm telling you now, your instincts exist for a reason. Listen to them. My 3 babies never got names, never got birthdays, never got to grow up and become whoever they were meant to be, but they existed, they were real, and they mattered. Their short lives had meaning, even if that meaning was just to teach me how strong I could be, how much I could survive, how fiercely I could fight for the children who came after them. I carry them with me every day, 3 small flames in my heart that will never go out, and when Eleanor asks me why, I hold her so tight. Sometimes I tell her the truth. I'm holding on for all the ones I couldn't hold, and she hugs me back as hard as her little arms can squeeze, and somehow that makes everything okay. This is my story, the story of how my mother-in-law killed 3 of my children, and my husband let her do it, the story of how I found out the truth and made sure they both paid for what they did, the story of how I survived and rebuilt, and eventually found my way back to hope. I'm sharing it because I want other women to know that they're not alone, that monsters sometimes look like smiling grandmothers with cups of tea, that justice is possible even when it seems impossible, and that no matter how broken you feel, you can put yourself back together piece by piece, day by day, until you're whole again. Patricia thought she could control my body, control my fertility, control whether or not I would be allowed to bring children into the world. She thought she was protecting her precious family bloodline from contamination by my unsuitable genes, but she failed, because despite everything she did to stop me, I am a mother now. I have a beautiful, healthy daughter who will grow up knowing how much she is loved, and who will never ever be left alone with anyone who hasn't earned my complete and absolute trust. Patricia is dead, Brandon is in prison, and I am here alive and free and surrounded by the family I built from the ashes of the family they destroyed. The last thing I want to say is this to any mother-in-law reading this who thinks she has the right to decide whether her son's wife should have children, to any husband who lets his mother poison his wife, to any person who believes that bloodlines and genetics and family purity matter more than human life. You are wrong, and you will be caught. The truth always comes out eventually, and when it does, you will lose everything: your freedom, your family, your legacy, all of it gone, because you couldn't accept that your child grew up and chose their own partner the way children are supposed to do. I am living proof that your cruelty will not go unpunished, and my daughter is living proof that your hatred cannot stop life from finding a way. My name is Meredith, and I am a survivor, a mother, a wife, and a woman who will never let anyone hurt her family again. Thank you for reading my story, and please, if any part of it resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life you might save.